Good evening again. I'd like to call the committee of the whole for the Village of Cary for June 18th, 2024 to order with roll call, please.
Stefani.
Here.
McAlpine.
Here.
Walrath.
Here.
Collier.
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now moving to public comment, where the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise on the agenda. I had one person sign in, Chris.
Okay. First thing is, you just issued that builder a check for the sidewalk and curb. I'm not a builder, but he mentioned something about utility service from ComEd. Everybody pays for utility service, and he just mentioned something about that. Every one of you pay utility service through ComEd. And why did he think that? It's like he didn't even realize to have ComEd run service. I think that's kind of where this money that he just keeps asking for is kind of pathetic. I mean, and I don't, how you question the fact about the TIF tax writing that money. I mean, and I don't understand how when there's I don't know if any of you have been to a school district meeting, how when a subject comes up, everybody says something, you get their opinion from everybody. Everybody here, it's like, yes. Nobody, we just heard your opinion, but we didn't hear anybody else's opinion about certain issues. And the next thing is with Maplewood property. Is there going to be the school torn down so they can make that at least a grass field or something instead of a fenced-in school area that the neighbors have to look at?
I would direct that question towards the school board. We are working with them right now on some alternative plans. But any questions regarding that particular piece of property should be directed to the school board.
Okay, and then one last thing with the farmers market downtown is great. It's awesome. Between the Rotary Club and what Leo does with the tracks and stuff, it was great. I went down there and it's awesome. And I understand you're trying to get people in to Cary, but now here you want to add that extra 1% tax. How that's going to affect the restaurants too? I mean, and last 2 weeks ago, you got that the electric energy one. You got the check for it, and you're out. Well, we can put some downtown, some to Rotary Park, some to here. Why can't that go towards improvements, sidewalk, streets, something along that line that is useful? I mean, it's like here you're already designated it out.
Well, that's, I'm going to address a couple of your comments that you had made. One, when we talked about there's yes, no's. Everything that we talked about or everything we voted on tonight has already been discussed at length during a committee of the whole meeting. So we've all heard what everybody has to think about various things. And sometimes you see the consent agenda. There's a lot of the things that go on there that we talk about that are just regular standard business. It's a standard operating procedure. We put those on there just to make sure that we run a tight meeting and we can talk about whatever else is on the agenda. With regards to the ComEd, ComEd does charge to bring electrical services to new developments, and those costs exceeding. I've heard that a couple of times from other developers that it's becoming very expensive to bring utilities. Just like when we bring utilities, plumbing or the sewer and water to a different project, that costs money, and that money is paid for by the developer. So when it
But
comes to
it's
that.
like, he doesn't, if he's been in business that long, like, he should consider these factors in when he's building. And now,
Well, some of those cost overruns are just unexpected. That's just the nature of the development community. That's just normally what happens. And like Trustee McAlpine mentioned, they have contingency funds that they build into these cost overruns. You know, there's not a lot we can do about when another utility presses a fee to do something. We have no control over that.
okay. And nothing, this tax that you want to add, now, let's say after a year's time, can you additionally find a way to add an additional tax?
Not at this point. Remember when we went through the whole home rule, that whole
Yes, I
referendum?
understand
That was the biggest part of the home rule that most of the people that came to the meetings understood was that the 1% sales tax was more of a broadly, well, we'll talk more about it that's on the agenda, so hold tight on that. But if you go to the other home rule communities, Algonquin, Crystal Lake, McHenry, Lake in the Hills, they already have that. And so anybody that lives in those other communities that we're trying to get to come into the Village of Cary will pay that. So we can become less reliant on property taxes. So more money we get in from other people, coming in to enjoy what we have to offer, the better it is for us. That way we become less likely to look at property taxes. And we're already one of the lowest property tax. We're under 5% of the total tax bill. So we would much rather, this board is very concerned about keeping our property taxes low. Now remember, that 5% out of that whole bill comes to the Village of Cary, and half of that goes towards police pension. So we're very concerned about how we rely on our property taxes. So why not, like all the other communities that have this, that have the sales tax, all of the other communities enjoy, anytime that you go to Crystal Lake or you go to Algonquin, you're already paying that.
Is this tax gonna affect pharmaceuticals? Is it gonna be like
No.
a home rule and it's only gonna affect?
Drugs are exempt from this, yes.
So is it just gonna be groceries, or what's it?
It'll be
gonna-
all general merchandise. Well, we're going to discuss it in a minute. So do you have anything else that you'd like to comment on? We'll talk about this under the
no.
agenda. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the committee of the whole? We'll go ahead and close that at 6:39. 2 items. The discussion regarding the potential implementation of a local general sales tax. Who's going to take this?
I will, if that's all right.
Thank you.
So as the board may be aware, House Bill 3144 was adopted by the General Assembly in early June, and it allows for, or will be making a change to allow for non-home rule municipalities to obtain a non-home rule sales tax without going to referendum. So when we've previously discussed both a home rule sales tax and we discussed a non-home rule sales tax, we talked about how you did have to go to referendum. This change, which as of right now has actually not been signed by the governor, but based on information that's been received just in the news, right? It's intended to be. But until, of course, it's finalized, we would not make any movement on this. But just to open the discussion, the Village of Cary, as a non-home rule municipality, would have the opportunity to pass an ordinance that would put a local general sales tax in effect. Very similar parameters as we discussed when we were talking about a home rule sales tax or when we were talking about the non-home rule sales tax. So if we were interested in the potential implementation of this sales tax, it would, again, still be up to 1% in increments of 0.25%. It does still exempt groceries and pharmaceuticals. That remains the same. So, again, the discussion can be opened up about how, if the village were to implement this, where would they like to see those funds utilized? So it's a very similar conversation to earlier this year that we had at the time, and we would still estimate this $500,000 to $600,000 could be a new revenue with if it was a 1% sales tax, to be clear. So one thing to think about is if the board was interested in implementing the sales tax, when to implement it. So if let's say we were to move forward and you wanted it implemented January 1, 2025, we would need to file with the Illinois Department of Revenue by October 1st. If you wanted a July 1, 2025 implementation, that would be April 1st, 2025. So just something to think about. The mayor alluded to this, and we had it in the presentation. So, and this may be very familiar from earlier this year, but just showing what the different sales tax are in our surrounding area. You can see a number of communities that are home rule do have a home rule sales tax. A number of communities that are non-home rule have implemented a non-home rule sales tax as well. Though I'm just to remind everyone, red is State of Illinois sales tax. The orange is the Regional Transportation Authority sales tax. That's, I believe, 0.75%. You'll see home rule and non-home rule. Some people have half a percentage. Some have 1%. Home rule, of course, can go beyond the 1%. So East Dundee, for example, actually has a 2%. You'll see some communities have passed business improvement districts. That's the yellow. And then Cook County is the only county that is allowed to be home rule, and they have a Cook County home rule sales tax. So when you're seeing the green, those are Cook County communities. So that's just the overview of our local communities. So, for example, I believe Crystal Lake right now is at 1%.
Actually, I think they went to like 1.25.
1.25, I apologize. You have McHenry that is sitting at 1%. Woodstock is at 1%. Lake in the Hills is at 1%. So just the local McHenry County communities, just want to give a reminder that they also sit at this 1%. Lake Zurich has a non-home rule sales tax, and they're at a 0.5%, just to give an example of a non-home rule municipality.
And kind of building upon the comment that was made in the public comment period, obviously we do take in consideration the vibrancy of our existing businesses. So noting that if the board was to implement a new general sales tax, this does level the playing field. It doesn't put Carrie's restaurants or businesses at a disadvantage compared to the comparable places one may shop at the nearby communities, as the exhibit shows.
So, and just for clarity, just so I'm understanding and the public can understand, if I go to Texas Roadhouse in Crystal Lake, I'm paying an additional 1.25% on my bill right now, correct? If Texas Roadhouse were in Cary, there is no 1%, 1.25% that they would actually get over here.
Correct.
So this is actually talking about throwing a 1% food tax, if you want to say, a restaurant tax or
Well, it's a general.
a general tax, thank you, going forward. So it's not adjusting property taxes. This is anyone that comes to eat within Cary would get hit with that one.
Right, or shopping at our stores, at our Jewel or wherever, people that you're already paying that. If you shop or you go to Algonquin Commons, you go to Crystal Lake, you go to all their stores, you're paying that already.
Items that are not considered grocery, though.
Grocery.
So there are items at Jewel, just to clarify this, because I know this was confusing. There are items at Jewel that are not considered grocery. And then there are, of course, grocery items, right? So, for example, alcohol is not a grocery, right? That's just an example, right? If you were at Jewel, right, and you had your receipt, you would actually see some items that are charged the grocery to sales tax, and then you would see some items that are charged if we had a non-home rule sales tax. So, and Jewel does that automatically, charging the correct tax to the correct items.
I think it shows up as like a T or something next to it, right, if they're taxed.
It also does not go on fuel, prescription drugs, or over-the-counter medication, correct?
No pharmaceuticals.
No pharmaceuticals.
And no fuel.
I don't know if it's fuel.
Does not go on fuels tax, right?
It's the MFT.
Yeah.
So it's separated. It
It's
doesn't
separated.
add to your fuel.
No.
Okay.
But if you bought items at Thornton's,
Yeah.
it could be on the
pop or
actual
something.
items.
Yes, I understand.
Well,
But
just
not
so-
the gas itself.
Yeah.
Well, just so people are aware that, when our last tax levy, we asked our current tax levy is what, $2.5 million, whatever that is. And our maximum amount of money that we can tax was like $140,000. This particular new tax would bring in roughly about an additional $600,000 to the village. So therefore, making it less likely that we would, as long as I've been sitting in this chair, I've never promised about taxes. You do what you have to do in the situation that you're in. But it would make us less likely to become so reliant on raising property taxes, that 5% of our property taxes. So it's up for discussion. I had a conversation with Trustee Dudek. He fully supports this effort. But, we have a little bit of time to have a couple more conversations about it. We've worked through my other roles that I have through Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and McHenry County Council of Governments. This is something that we have worked with the state on to give us this authority to level the playing fields, and I think the governor understands it. And we have been given the certainty that he will be signing this to give the municipalities the opportunities to be more self-sufficient in when it comes to this.
So my question is then, are we still losing grocery tax in general, the 4%?
Yes, and that's going to be another discussion, but that's not what this is about right now.
No.
Yeah,
but
so
we're-
currently the grocery tax is sunsetting, I guess you could say, January 1st, 2026.
2026.
Okay.
So the grocery tax is currently still in place until, through the state, until January 1st, 2026.
And just so
Could I ask for two background numbers you guys hit? You're starting to go down the avenue I want to go down. There's a reason we're having this discussion. And there are two big reasons that relate to what's happening in Springfield. One was just mentioned, the administration and everybody in Springfield has decided to try to make a balanced budget by making municipalities pay by taking our portion of the grocery tax away. So some of this is a replacement. The second piece goes back to a longer-running issue in the distributive fund. So if I could get dollar amounts, the anticipated dollar amount lost by the Village of Cary when the grocery tax sunsets, and then the historical amount that we, as a village, are losing every year with the distributive fund not being at its max capacity.
All right, I kind of know this. We've been talking about this a lot in Springfield. When the grocery tax is sunsetting, January 1st, 2026. Now, this is something that the state collects on behalf of municipalities. The state does not account for it. They are not losing revenue. They're not cutting programs. They're not doing anything because they have never seen this money. It's just simply a pass-through. And that to the Village of Cary is going to be about $500,000 or $600,000 a year. LGDF, as we go through with Springfield, we're trying to be very methodical about these because they are actually three separate issues. LGDF, which is the Local Government Distributive Fund, which is income taxes that you pay to your employer on behalf of the state of Illinois. 10% of that money is supposed to come to the municipality that you reside in. As it is right now, in 2011, they went down to 5%, and then we've been chiseling it back up. We're at we're like 6.16%, and we are continuously lobbying for that. And that's about $1 million to the Village of Cary every year that we're losing, that we're not getting reimbursed for. So we're trying to keep this, when the governor says, well, I'm going to give you this, I'm like, well, hold on. You still need to give us what the regular obligation is. You need to give us the full 10% back. And we are not, we're trying to, he didn't cut it this year in the budget. He didn't increase it this year in the budget. So it's kind of like a soft win. But we have worked tirelessly with his staff and his office about giving us the authority to implement the grocery tax, which will happen because that's money, that's $500,000 to us. And if we were to raise your property taxes, like I just said, that we can only get $140,000. So how are we going to get that delta? How are we going to get that without cutting services, without cutting personnel? So these are things that we are continuously working with our state legislature about and in the governor's office about the importance of the municipal financing, because I think that there's a lot of new people in Springfield that don't understand how municipalities are funded through the state and the various taxes. Unfortunately, tax is an ugly word, but that's how government is run, and that's just how it is. And the long and short of it is we are going to continue to lobby for the full restoration of the LGDF to get us to that full 10%, which would be probably an additional $1 million to the Village of Cary on an annual basis. Think about so since 2011, we've lost almost $12 million. Think of what we could have done with $12 million. Our streets and our roads and our sidewalks, all that stuff could have been taken care of. We wouldn't have had to, we could have plugged some other personnel things. But, you know, that's serious money. And then when he decided during his budget address, no one knew about it, that he was going to eliminate the grocery tax that he never sees, he never budgets for, it's never part of any program that they have, but it affects us, the Village of Cary, at $500,000. So those are real dollars amount. Those are real dollar amounts. So I think that it's up to us to make sure that we're making a very prudent decision on, do we want to keep things the way they are? And if we don't do this, what are we going to cut? Because we just can't sustain ourselves on losing, $1.5 million every year out of our $10 million budget. How do you do that?
And tying a bow around my thought, back circling around to what you're just discussing, Mayor, is I view this as I did with the home rule, knowing that we're going to have a pay cut, knowing that the state has decided that we're going to get less money. My intention and my thought process with this particular item is just to replace that money. If we are not able to replace that money, there are really only a couple of services that we offer. We've gotten things pretty tight at the Village of Cary, and it's safety and it's public works. So, we start talking about trying to find $500,000. How many police officers, how many snow plows, how much clean water can we now not produce for that $500,000? That's the way I look at it. So I in a general sense, without seeing the specifics, I'm in favor of this as an idea to replace that lost revenue. Not in addition to, but to replace this lost revenue.
Any other comments?
So where we would like to see this money earmarked? Where's the grocery tax earmarked to right now? General fund?
General fund. Now, remember, when you talk about a grocery tax, this is something that startled a lot of people during our last endeavor with this. Say you spend roughly $10,000 a year on groceries. The average resident that spends $10,000 a year on groceries would only be saving $100 out of the $10,000. But that $100 to the Village of Cary translates into $500,000 to provide the services that to the level that our residents demand. So we look at these things very seriously, and that's why we need to look at each individual of these funding mechanisms in three different buckets: LGDF, non-home rule sales tax, and the grocery tax. Because the grocery tax is going away. That's a done deal.
And the mayor connected those very well. They are three separate things, three separate issues that the mayor and the regional groups have been fighting for the municipalities on our behalf. But tonight, obviously, we brought forth a discussion on one of those pieces, one of those pieces, the local general sales tax, because this one does have this timing element that if it's something the village board and the village wants to pursue, we would just need to know what that timeline is depending on the desired implementation. The grocery tax, as Assistant Administrator Sage mentioned, doesn't sunset until January 2026. So there's a little bit more time, and that'll be a separate discussion. But that also has a separate authority that was granted in that recent legislation for non-home rule communities to also implement that. So they're separate, but they're holistically part of the same fabric of our budget, which is why I'm glad the trustees and the mayor are bringing them all up together, even though we're just discussing general sales tax tonight.
And this isn't a conversation we're just having tonight. I'm missing two trustees, and I already have talked to one about this, but we're missing another one who I have not discussed it. We will bring this back and have another meeting at a committee to discuss this, so generate. Hopefully, you'll have some questions. But all the other municipalities around us are doing the exact same thing, the non-home rule, on how we're able to do this. As a matter of fact, Crystal Lake, they're gonna they're gonna be missing like $3 million. $3 million.
So I do have a quick question. When we're talking about the other municipalities that are above us already, they can still enact this on top of that sales tax, or no?
No.
No.
Well, they can raise their taxes if they're home rule.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
a home
only
rule
if they're
could
home rule.
continue to raise their percentage, because they can't have both.
Both.
Yeah,
Not
a
both.
home rule can have a home rule sales tax and a non-home rule not. Yep.
Thank you.
The grocery tax would be separate, but.
Right.
And we'll keep that entirely separate. It would be two separate votes here. Obviously with the non-home rule sales tax, technically I don't know if that's what its final name will be, but it's limited on what those funds are able to be used for as well. That's why we had a very big discussion a few months back, talking about infrastructure and capital projects that this money could be put forward The roads was a big discussion, right, of the need for roads, sidewalks, stormwater, drainage, things like that. So as the board, if you'd like us to, staff to continue to kind of gain information, provide those numbers, and then also outreach to residents just to let them know that this is being considered, we could do something, not to the same extreme, but the same level of the home rule referendum, of just providing the information of what does this really mean, so residents get an understanding.
But if there's a desire from the board to maybe try and hit, if it were to be considered and approved, that January implementation, 2025, we would need direction to start that process sooner than later. If you're content with waiting for maybe the second implementation date, then it does give us more time for outreach. But we don't need a decision tonight, but if you have a thought on the timing that you might want to consider, that does help us kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together with our work plan.
And we're not rushing through this. We have time. We have time to do this.
I agree. I just, my comments are that I think it behooves us that we have to look at this. If we are looking at, we have to look at the big picture of what's happening, what's coming down, and we have to plan accordingly. So if we know this is coming, then we have to make prudent decisions on how to be good financial stewards of our taxpayer dollars. So I definitely think that we need to pursue this. I'm open to, the sooner than later to really get some numbers and be able to move forward so that we know what we're dealing with. And, that's my thoughts on it.
Any other?
I would have one other comment on I would like to continue to discuss it. I made my statement earlier, I want this to be tied as closely to the exit date, to the sunset date of the other one, so that would put it in July of next year. I would be open to a larger discussion about if we're going to earmark the money specifically in the ordinance for something. I would want to have a serious discussion about that, because not only do we not know what the future is, the background in my business is a lot of municipalities did that in enterprise funds in the 80s and 90s, and when the economy changed, that went very, very south for a whole lot of municipalities trying to bail out their enterprise funds. So it's well intended to improve, in this example, just our roads. But then what if there's a future unforeseen issue somewhere else in public works or in the police department or administration? So taking money and forcing it into just one area, we need to have a very serious discussion about that if we're going to pigeonhole it in with this ordinance.
Right. Thank you.
So I got a question about that when he said that. So if we did that, if you put general fund every year, you can earmark a different spot for the money?
Well, we can, through the budget process.
I know what
and
he's
through the
saying, you don't
workshops.
want to just hold it in and say it's roads
Well,
only, it
the-
goes
it-
south, it goes bad, now you need to change it till we got to
Attorney
replace
Euler
air
can
conditioning.
provide some clarification.
So if your comment was you didn't want to restrict it in the adopting ordinance to a particular infrastructure improvement, that makes sense. It is limited to expenditures that involve capital infrastructure. So if you leave it at that, it is a general category. And by using these funds to spend the monies we need to spend on capital infrastructure, we free up money for other general fund purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll continue the discussion. Next is a discussion regarding some minor changes to the Selkie Commercial Plan Unit Development regarding the car wash. Director Simmons, I think you got this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The item before the board this evening is related to the car wash facility that was approved for the Selkie PUD a few years ago. They are looking to make some minor modifications to the site plan, which, as the board may recall, under the village's plan unit development regulations, there are various elements that staff can approve administratively. Basically, minor changes to a PUD plan would are summarized in the slide, but basically that don't increase the height of buildings or reduce open space, modify the portion of housing types, which this particular development does not have any dwelling units within it. So the overall change that they're proposing here is related to when the project receives zoning approval. The Thornton's site was under construction at the time, and they had made a modification to that site plan, which didn't require board approval, but that in effect has modified or caused an issue with the car wash's property. So in this slide, you can kind of see what the proposed modification is on the left image, where the Thornton's driveway comes in off of the main driveway off of Route 14. The car wash as originally approved, its location, there's now a disalignment between those two drive aisles. So there's a competing left turn movement. If you're leaving both of those sites, you can have cars competing against each other with left-hand turns. So to make a modification to align those two entrances required a modification to the car wash site. So instead of its queuing and pay lanes being on the west side of the building, they're relocating that to the east side of the building and then rotating the building. So instead of it going from south to north through the car wash, vehicles would go from the north to the south and then exiting out the property. So the image on the right you can see is the reconfiguration. The building does shift slightly on the property, and the property parcel for the car wash does increase slightly as well, but overall meets kind of the original intent of what was approved by the board. So staff believes it does meet the minor amendment change as that staff can support. I just wanted concurrence from the board on that. If the board concurred with that assessment without having to require the project to go back through the zoning process for this change. Happy to answer any questions the board may have, but that's the brief overview of what is being requested this evening.
Any questions? I think we're in alignment. Excuse the pun.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss litigation pending or imminent, 5 Illinois CS 120/2C11.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we will be adjourning from the executive session because there's no action afterwards.